Chosen one, you didn't find this message found you. And not because of a clever algorithm, but because the Spirit of God is moving through back channels, reaching only those whose hearts are tuned to heaven's frequency. This isn't for everyone. In fact, most won't even finish this message, not because it's untrue, but because it's too true, too raw, too divine. And that's exactly why God does not want it out. Not widely, not prematurely. There are things God hides in silence, not because they are unworthy, but because they are holy. And what I'm about to speak isn't meant for public consumption. It's meant for spiritual transaction. There are secrets so sacred that if revealed too soon, they would be mocked, mishandled, or even destroyed. Have you ever wondered why some of your prayers went unanswered? Not because they weren't powerful, but because they were protected. If you're still here, you've already crossed a line most people never do. You've stepped into a realm where God is no longer speaking in shouts, but in whispers. And this whisper carries fire. It carries blueprints. It carries divine danger, the kind of truth that shifts atmospheres and unsettles the powers that be. What if the very thing you've been waiting for is already unfolding, but God told no one but you? Before we dive deeper, I want to pause and say this from my heart. To those of you who've supported this ministry with your super thanks, thank you. What you sowed in private, heaven is honoring in ways no platform could ever reveal. And if you're feeling a pull in your spirit right now, that's not emotion, that's divine recognition. Comment 777 right now if your spirit says yes to what's being stirred. That number is not a gimmick, it's a sign, completion, activation, heaven's fingerprint on your obedience. But here's what you need to understand. This word is cloaked, not because it's a secret, but because it's a strategy. God isn't hiding it from you. He's hiding it for you. Only those with the oil of discernment will grasp what's being unveiled next. Still with me? Then stay close, because what's about to be spoken will explain everything you couldn't tell anyone, and it will confirm what your spirit already knows, but your mind couldn't yet explain. God's chosen ones. God does not want it out. Listen now. You've been wondering why everything around you seems to grow quieter, why the applause has faded, why some doors are slow to open. Could it be that God is shielding you from exposure, not because you're forgotten, but because you're entrusted with something sacred? You carry a fire that is not meant to flicker in public winds. It needs to be fanned in private altars first. You are not behind schedule. You are under divine surveillance. How many times have you shared something straight from your spirit, only to watch it unravel before it could take form? Have you ever felt the sting of speaking prematurely, when what you birthed wasn't ready to walk, let alone stand? That's not coincidence. That's a caution from heaven. Just like Joseph, who revealed his dreams too early to brothers who didn't carry the capacity to celebrate him. Genesis 37, 5-11. You've been entrusted with visions that require protection, not publicity. Revelation without timing is not favor, it's vulnerability. Have you noticed how butterflies never crawl back into the cocoon once they emerge? But if disturbed mid-process, their wings collapse. That's what happens when you reveal destiny before it's developed. You're in the chrysalis, not in hiding, but in formation. What if your silence isn't stagnation, but sacred strategy? David was anointed king long before he ever sat on the throne, 1 Samuel 16:13. But he didn't rush to declare himself. He stayed in the shadows of obedience, not because he lacked greatness, but because he respected God's process. What you carry, chosen one, is heavy. Too heavy to be handled by unclean hands or distracted hearts. Your ideas, your calling, your transformation, it all needs covering. Heaven has protocols. Not everything heaven plants should be immediately posted, performed, or pronounced. Some things grow best in the soil of secrecy. As Proverbs 25:11 says, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver." Timing sanctifies the message, and your voice, when released under obedience, will echo farther than any broadcast birthed from insecurity. Famed American theologian and civil rights leader Howard Thurman once said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and go do it." He lived this truth in quiet strength, mentoring leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., not through spotlight performances, but in private impartation. What if God is calling you to become that kind of power, silent, steady, sovereign? Remember when Jesus healed the blind man in Mark 8:22-26. He took him outside the village before restoring his sight. Even Christ himself avoided spectacle when a sacred moment was unfolding. Could your silence be the setting of a miracle? Sophia, a young architect in Amsterdam, once shared her breakthrough design concept with an old colleague she thought she could trust. Days later, it showed up on social media under someone else's name. That betrayal almost caused her to walk away from the very field she was born to impact. But what she didn't know was that God would lead her into a competition a year later, where her authentic design, refined in silence, would win global awards. That delay wasn't a detour, it was divine differentiation. You've mistaken observers for allies. You thought vulnerability would yield validation. But discernment is not distrust, it's spiritual stewardship. As Ecclesiastes 3:7 reminds us, there's a time to keep silent and a time to speak. You must master both to protect what God is cultivating in you. Have you ever stopped to wonder, who truly has the capacity to hold what you're carrying? Can the people you're speaking to see the crown on your seed, or are they still judging the soil it's buried in? What if the applause you're seeking is actually an ambush in disguise? Author and media mogul Ava DuVernay once shared that she didn't direct her first feature film until age 32. She said, "I didn't rush. I trusted that the right moment would find me." That's divine timing over worldly urgency. The world applauds speed, but heaven rewards surrender. You were not created to be consumed. You were crafted to be consecrated. Your voice isn't missing, it's maturing. Your silence isn't punishment, it's prophecy. The next time you're tempted to explain yourself, pause. Heaven is still writing the sentence. Don't interrupt what God is still authoring. The enemy thrives on blueprint leaks. If he can't kill the vessel, he'll try to sabotage the vision by pushing it into premature labor. That's why you've been feeling pressed to stay hidden. You've been cloaked not in fear, but in fire. And the moment will come when God says speak, you will roar with authority, not noise. You've been feeling the urge to speak, to share, to unveil what's been stirring within you. But every time you do, something feels off. You wonder why clarity fades after confession, or why momentum dies the moment your mouth opens. That's not coincidence, it's consequence. You weren't meant to deliver what hasn't been fully developed. The more you speak from impulse instead of instruction, the more spiritual oxygen you leak from the assignment itself. Purpose thrives under obedience, not overexposure. What if the battle you're facing isn't about your enemies, but about your eagerness? Can you discern the difference between excitement and empowerment, between revelation and readiness? You've been operating from a heart full of fire, but lacking the oil to sustain it. Fire can ignite a movement, but without oil, it burns out too soon. The Holy Spirit is whispering to your soul, "Let me reveal you when you're ready, not when you're just restless." In Numbers 22, Balaam was prepared to prophesy, but without alignment, his gift could have cursed what God intended to bless. It was only when God opened his eyes to the angel in his path that he understood. Divine gifting doesn't equal divine timing. You are gifted, but gifting without guidance is spiritual vulnerability. You might recall when Jesus told his disciples in John 16:12, "I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now." Heaven's pattern is always protection before promotion. God is not withholding from you. He's shielding you from premature warfare. Could it be that you're speaking ahead of your anointing's armor? What happens when you open your mouth without spiritual fortification? Who's really benefiting from your transparency, your destiny, or the people secretly waiting for your downfall? Pope John the 23rd, known for initiating the transformative Second Vatican Council, once said, "Consult not your fears, but your hopes and your dreams. Think not about your frustrations, but about your unfulfilled potential." And yet, before calling the council, he waited in silence, prayed in solitude, and discerned in secret. He didn't act from pressure. He waited for the pulse of heaven. What if that's what's missing from your rhythm? Spiritual restraint. Daniela, a wellness coach in Toronto, once felt compelled to share her vision for a healing center during a live podcast interview. The idea was genuine, the passion deep, but the timing was off. Weeks later, competitors launched a similar program. Her vision was not stolen. It was simply unprotected. In her words, "I was speaking from excitement, not from instruction, and it cost me the first version of my dream." But God, in His mercy, gave her a new blueprint. This time, she built it in secret, and it thrived. You're not in trouble, you're in training. That inner tension you feel, it's not condemnation, it's calibration. God is fine-tuning your discernment, teaching you that silence is not suppression, it's spiritual security. As Proverbs 13:3 declares, "Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin." You've been clapping for yourself prematurely and inviting others to clap along, not realizing that some hands hide daggers. Have you asked yourself lately, who am I performing for? Do they love you? Or do they love the access your vulnerability gives them? Not all attention is affirmation. Not all curiosity is covenant. Some want proximity, not partnership. There's a tree in the highlands of Ethiopia called the waka tree. It grows tall and wide, but only when its roots remain hidden in deep, silent soil for years. If unearthed too soon, the roots will dry out and the tree will die. Your destiny is the same. Its strength is hidden in silence. Its height depends on what you've allowed to go unseen. When Samuel went to anoint the next king of Israel, 1 Samuel 16, even he was almost deceived by appearance. But God corrected him, saying, "Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." You see, even spiritual leaders can be misled by exposure. This is why God keeps covering you, because you carry something that can't be discerned by surface eyes. Are you desperate to be seen or prepared to be sent? Are you longing for applause or alignment? Can you distinguish between being revealed by heaven and being marketed by the flesh? What you're experiencing isn't shame, it's mercy. You're being preserved for something holy. If you rise too soon, the crown will crush you. But if you wait, the anointing will carry you. What's coming doesn't need your self-promotion. It needs your submission. Heaven will not allow what's holy to be diluted by your hurry. Stay hidden until the oil is undeniable. There's been a restlessness in your spirit lately, a tension between revelation and restraint. You're bursting with visions, blueprints, breakthroughs. You want to share. You want to post. You want to announce what's next. But each time you do it without God's confirmation, something feels misaligned. That's not coincidence. It's divine restraint. You weren't instructed to share. You were invited to steward. Every dream that leaves your mouth without heaven's permission becomes vulnerable to hands that were never meant to carry it, and hearts too distorted to honor it. Have you noticed that the more you talk, the less peace you feel? Could it be that your overexposure has opened the door to spiritual contamination? Have you stopped to wonder, who's really listening when you speak? Not all ears are designed for holy things. Some carry daggers disguised as dialogue. Some celebrate you outwardly while seeding sabotage inwardly. Your dream is a sacred seed, and not every soil is blessed to hold it. God is whispering to your heart, I never asked you to explain it. I asked you to trust me with it. Like Mary, who received a word from the angel in Luke 1:30-38, you are not meant to broadcast what you're still carrying in gestation. Mary didn't start a ministry tour. She treasured the word in her heart. She didn't need a platform, she needed alignment. And so do you. Could the silence around you be holy? Could the delay you feel be a setup, not a setback? God's voice is not always thunderous. Sometimes it arrives in a stillness so sacred it requires a surrendered soul to hear it. As 1 Kings 19:12 reveals, Elijah didn't find God in the earthquake, nor in the fire, but in the gentle whisper. And that's where you are now, in the whispering place of destiny. If you keep speaking over God, you'll never hear the direction that saves your life. Award-winning author and former monk Jay Shetty once said, "The loudest voice is not always the most powerful. True clarity lives in stillness." Before he became a global voice of wisdom, he spent years in silence, cleaning temples and meditating in obscurity. What if your quiet season is not a punishment, but your spiritual apprenticeship? Take the story of Lucien, a financial strategist in Paris. After receiving a prophetic dream about a kingdom-minded investment model, he felt an urgency to tell his colleagues. But that same week, two of them quietly launched a diluted version of his idea with worldly branding. Crushed but not defeated, Lucien withdrew, fasted, and resubmitted the vision to God. This time, he wrote nothing, posted nothing, and shared nothing for an entire year. When he finally launched, doors opened globally, because what he now carried was anointed, not just exciting. Proverbs 29:11 says, "A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back." You are not being held back to be humiliated, you're being held back to be hurled forward. Heaven has chosen the slingshot for your promotion. But slingshots only work if there's tension, only if you're pulled back far enough, only if you're still. Can you stay quiet long enough to gain the momentum that will change everything? Like the snow leopard in the Himalayas, your impact is being shaped in silence. This rare creature moves without sound, waits with unmatched patience, and strikes with power no one saw coming. It's not loud, but it's legendary. Just like the vision in your spirit, when heaven's timing meets your obedience, the launch will speak louder than any announcement ever could. Ask yourself, what's more important, being seen early or being sent accurately? Would you rather explain your promise or embody it? The longer you try to manage optics, the longer you delay the oil. What God has for you doesn't need a press release, it needs a prayer life. Jesus often withdrew to solitary places, Luke 5:16, not because he feared crowds, but because he honored alignment. You too are being pulled away, not to shrink, but to synchronize with sacred timing. The delay you feel is not God ignoring you, it's Him perfecting you. And if you can quiet your voice long enough, you'll hear that He never left. He's been whispering through the silence. Wait, I'm not finished building you yet. This one will sting, but it must be said, not every delay in your life was orchestrated by the devil. Some were born from misplaced trust. What if the detour you're grieving began the moment you handed your vision to someone unequipped to carry it? You didn't mean to sabotage it. You simply believed the wrong soul was a safe place. You mistook availability for assignment. But just because someone is close to you doesn't mean they're called to hold what heaven whispered. Have you ever shared a holy thing only to feel empty afterward? Have you ever left a conversation with someone who promised to pray for you but walked away confused, anxious, or even ashamed? Could it be that the very atmosphere God entrusted to your care was contaminated by careless agreement? You thought you were building an altar, but now you're dodging arrows, and not from outsiders, but from those once trusted to watch your back. In Judges 16, Samson told Delilah the secret of his strength. He didn't share it with a soldier. He shared it with someone who smiled while planning his downfall. That's how spiritual sabotage works. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It affirms with words and dismantles with intent. God is not just calling you to walk in purpose. He's calling you to guard it like treasure. Bishop T.D. Jakes once warned, "Stop watering dead plants." Just because something once had roots in your life doesn't mean it still brings fruit. Some friendships are expired, but still in rotation. Could it be that you're confiding in someone whose season has already shifted, but you kept them in a spiritual role they no longer fit? And now, the delay you're experiencing isn't warfare. It's weight from someone who should have been released. A woman named Kira, a non-profit leader in Chicago, once felt prompted to share her next project, a faith-based domestic violence shelter, with a longtime friend. That friend smiled, nodded, even offered advice. But within weeks, rumors started circulating. Funding partners became hesitant. Kira would later learn that the friend didn't betray her out of malice, but out of fear that her own work would be overshadowed. Kira's dream wasn't attacked by an enemy. It was wounded by insecurity. The prophet Amos once said, "Can two walk together unless they have agreed to do so?" Amos 3:3. You've mistaken proximity for alignment. Not everyone clapping is connected to your covenant, and some are only standing close enough to hear what they can imitate, without ever honoring its origin. Your vision is not fragile, but it is holy, and holiness demands discretion. It cannot be laid on the altars of opinion or handled by those who see it as a stepping stone rather than a sacred trust. Have you discerned whether those around you are soul carriers or soul siphoners? Are they watering your destiny or leaking it out through casual conversations and envy-cloaked questions? Mother Teresa, a woman of fierce compassion and quiet strength, rarely shared her inner anguish with those around her. In fact, many of her personal journals, later published, revealed that she carried deep spiritual burdens silently before God. She knew the difference between confession and compromise, that not every burden was meant to be broadcast. Sometimes sacred things must bleed only before the cross. What you carry, chosen one, is weighty. It was never meant for every hand. As 2 Corinthians 4:7 declares, we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. That treasure requires thick covering, sacred privacy, and relentless discernment. Don't cast it before ears that itch only to analyze, not to intercede. The harpy eagle, one of the strongest raptors in the world, builds its nest high above dense rainforests, far from predators, far from curious creatures. It doesn't place its eggs where many can reach, because what is rare must be hidden. What is powerful must be lifted, and what is yours must be protected with vision and height. So ask yourself quietly, are you delaying your promise by allowing the wrong hearts into holy places? Are you handing out blueprints to people who don't even believe the house can be built? Are you grieving over betrayal or being invited into mastery over your mouth? The weight you feel is not proof you're failing. It's proof you're chosen. And chosen things require sacred boundaries. You're not paranoid, you're prophetic. And God is retraining your heart to know the difference between shared joy and silent sabotage. He's not just giving you vision, He's giving you discernment. What you're sensing right now is not paranoia, it's preservation. You're in a holy transition, and in this sacred threshold, applause can be more dangerous than opposition. Your spirit is growing sharper because God is tuning your ears not to the cheers of men, but to the cautions of heaven. This is a season where discernment must outweigh display. Every dream doesn't need a declaration. Every miracle doesn't need a microphone. Have you stopped to ask, who's really in your corner? Who's clapping with clean hands, and who's only mimicking the sound while secretly monitoring your steps? God never asked you to make your vision visible before He made it mature. You were told to nurture it, not broadcast it, to carry it in private wombs of worship, not in public arenas of validation. In Matthew 1:19, when Joseph discovered that Mary was pregnant, he planned to divorce her quietly, not out of shame, but out of reverence for something he didn't yet understand. Heaven had a plan, and God sent an angel in a dream to affirm that what was conceived in her was of the Holy Spirit. There are things you carry, chosen one, that even those closest to you can't yet comprehend. That's why God is asking for silence. Not because your blessing is small, but because it's supernatural. Have you considered that your last post may have made you popular, but made your promise a target? That what felt like boldness may have actually been premature release? There is a difference between courage and timing. You can be right in revelation, but wrong in rhythm. Have you felt the hush around your spirit lately? The sudden stillness after your announcement? That's not rejection, it's realignment. Media mogul and philanthropist Bob Goff once said, "We won't be distracted by comparison if we're captivated with purpose." But purpose doesn't scream, it whispers. Bob built much of his early work quietly, behind the scenes, ministering to people others ignored. His strategy? Protect the mission until it was unshakable. Your calling deserves the same covering. Ezra, a photographer in Nairobi, once posted a photo series inspired by a dream he believed came from God, an artistic depiction of healing across tribal lines. The project went viral. It reached embassies, non-profits, and networks. But what came next was warfare. False accusations, hacking attempts, stolen concepts. Ezra was confused. God, wasn't I obedient? And the answer came, yes, but not aligned. He had the vision, but not the divine release. A year later, in a time of prayer and fasting, he was given the green light, and this time with legal covering, spiritual backup, and global favor. As Proverbs 18:2 warns, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. You are not a fool, but if you're honest, excitement made you impulsive, and the enemy doesn't need access to your soul if you keep handing him access to your strategies. Not every open door is holy. Some are just well-decorated distractions. The cicada, buried underground for years, emerges only when conditions are perfectly aligned. It doesn't rush. It doesn't preview. It prepares in hiddenness, knowing that emerging too early could mean death. And yet when the time comes, it sings, not for attention, but from alignment. You too are not being held back. You are being synchronized with heaven's signal. Have you asked yourself, why does it feel like your momentum suddenly vanished after exposure? Why did connections dry up after you shared the very thing you thought would open doors? Could it be that your testimony wasn't ready to testify yet? That the blessing wasn't designed to be seen, it was designed to be sealed? Jesus often healed people and then told them, "See that you don't tell anyone." Mark 1:44. Not because he was ashamed of the miracle, but because he understood timing. Obedience in silence is sometimes louder in heaven than declarations in public. You're not being muted, you're being matured. So take inventory, guard your circle, ask God to audit your alignment, because while the world chases going viral, heaven values what's vital. And what's vital right now is your ability to protect what's sacred. Don't let excitement become exposure. Don't let affirmation replace anointing. This isn't about fear. This is about formation. You're not losing favor. You're learning to carry it. The enemy doesn't need access to your thoughts when you've already granted him access to your feed. He doesn't have to decode your calling when you've openly captioned every move. Social media isn't demonic, but it is a mirror. And sometimes that mirror reflects your impatience more than your obedience. Every time you upload a revelation that hasn't yet been sealed in prayer, you expose the seed to wind, weather, and warfare it wasn't yet designed to survive. Why is it so quiet after you post? Why do you feel unrest after you reveal? Could it be that your strategy is sound, but your timing is off? You're not being punished. You're being protected from premature exposure. Just like Nehemiah refused to tell anyone the details of his mission until the walls were fortified, Nehemiah 2:12 through 17, you're being called to build in silence. Not because your calling is fragile, but because it's fortified by what cannot yet be seen. The Holy Spirit is whispering, "Put the phone down. Return the dream to the altar. Let me finish what I authored in heaven before you announce it on earth." Heaven doesn't need hype, it needs holiness. And this next breakthrough is too sacred, too thunder-backed, too covenant-bound to be delayed by a caption. The scroll of your destiny is still being written. Posting it won't speed it up. It might slow it down. Actor and humanitarian Forrest Whitaker once said, "Sometimes the most powerful voice is the one you choose not to use." Throughout his decades-long career, he's quietly supported causes that changed nations without seeking applause. Power without noise. Purpose without performance. Could that be your invitation too? To become so anchored in calling that silence becomes your strategy? Zahara, a software architect from Berlin, once shared her spiritual tech project on a live stream, a tool meant to help trauma survivors navigate healing through daily scripture and biometric feedback. She was flooded with likes and comments, but within weeks another startup launched a near-identical app backed by bigger investors and media. Zahara spiraled into confusion until, in prayer, she heard, "The vision was heaven-born, but the rollout was flesh-led." She went silent for a year. During that time, she fasted, rewrote the code, and partnered with faith leaders instead of influencers. Now her version, rooted in obedience, is reaching underground churches and refugee centers far beyond the algorithm's spotlight. Psalm 39:1 says, "I will guard my ways that I may not sin with my tongue. I will guard my mouth with a muzzle so long as the wicked are in my presence." You've mistaken warfare for weakness. But this silence, it's sacred. God is positioning you like a lion crouching before the leap. Stillness is not stagnation, it's strategy. The black panther, rarely seen in the wild, moves through shadows, not because it fears the light, but because its strength lies in precision. Its power isn't reduced by silence, it's sharpened by it. You too are being refined in the quiet. You're in a holy holding pattern, not because you're being overlooked, but because you are over-prepared. Ask yourself, what if this stillness is saving your destiny from sabotage? What if the silence is not evidence that you're forgotten, but that you've been marked for something too valuable to be wasted on spectators? Would you trade divine orchestration for digital affirmation? Remember when Jesus healed Jairus' daughter in Luke 8:49-56. He dismissed the crowd, told them she was only sleeping, and took only Peter, John, James, and her parents into the room. The miracle didn't need witnesses. It needed agreement. The crowd had volume, but no vision, and neither should have access to what heaven is resurrecting in you. Your voice has been too loud for this phase, not because you're wrong, but because the frequency of heaven is subtle. Divine alignment requires spiritual quiet. God is opening doors you can't see, removing traps you didn't know were set, and securing provisions you haven't even prayed for. But all of it is happening in the silence. This season isn't punishment, it's preparation. Your dream isn't dying, it's deepening. Heaven is anchoring you beneath the surface where legacy takes root. Every second you stay still, a new dimension of strength is forming. And when God lifts the curtain, what emerges won't just be seen, it will shake systems. Valuable things aren't rushed, they're refined, and so are you. This is not a season for updates, it's a season for sacred, unseen moves. God is pulling you into alignment, not performance, into quiet obedience, not loud validation. He's whispering with fierce urgency, "Let no one know until I move. Let no hand interrupt what my spirit is forming. Let no mouth declare what hasn't yet passed through my fire." Have you considered that your silence may be the sound heaven is waiting for? That every word you withhold is a shield in the spirit? That what you think is transparency might actually be a leak? The quieter you become, the louder heaven testifies on your behalf. What if every premature post isn't just information, it's infiltration? What if the wrong eyes are not scrolling, they're scanning? As Jesus said in Matthew 6:6, "When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." This is a sacred reminder. What is hidden in faith will be revealed in glory. But if you trade that hiddenness for human approval, you abort the spiritual authority that was growing underground. People aren't always watching to intercede. Many are watching to interfere. They're not praying for your oil, they're preying on it, not because you're weak, but because you're weighty. Not because you're failing, but because you're fertile. Every move you share prematurely becomes an open invitation for demonic interception. There's no need to fear, just to fortify. Artist and activist Ai Weiwei, known for his fearless work exposing injustice in China, once said, "Everything is art, everything is politics, everything is truth." And yet, when his life was under threat, he created in silence. He built exhibits under aliases, filmed projects in secret, and only revealed them when the impact was irreversible. The most powerful works were those protected from censorship and sabotage. Likewise, your spiritual masterpiece needs privacy until it's too late for the enemy to unmake what God has made. Mason, a high school teacher from Atlanta, once testified that he shared a ministry initiative on social media, an outreach to incarcerated youth, with joyful boldness. Within days, anonymous complaints reached the school board. Meetings were cancelled, resources were cut. His vision hit a wall, but as he entered a fast, God revealed the post wasn't evil, it was early. 6 months later, in silence, Mason rebuilt. He partnered with churches quietly, raised funds privately, and launched a rebranded program. Today, his work runs in 5 states, unshaken because it was rooted in obedience, not exposure. Psalm 91:1 reminds us, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." This is the safest place for your promise, under the shelter of secrecy. Not shame, not fear, but sanctuary. Your silence is not passive, it is prophetic. It is the veil between the holy and the hostile. The octopus, one of the most intelligent creatures of the sea, releases ink when threatened, not to fight, but to disappear, not to engage, but to preserve. Some battles are won not through confrontation, but concealment. You are not hiding. You are preserving the purity of what's growing. You are shielding the oil that cost you everything to carry. Have you wondered why it feels like the more you share, the more resistance rises? Why your moments of vulnerability online are met with sudden tension in your spirit? Could it be that some spaces you've trusted were never sanctified to handle your truth? Jesus, transfigured on the mountain in Matthew 17, allowed only Peter, James, and John to witness it. He didn't live stream his glory. He invited only those prepared to steward what they saw. This wasn't secrecy, it was sacred strategy. What God is doing in you isn't for preview, it's for permanence, and permanence requires protection. You don't owe anyone access to your process. Let them see the fruit, not the fertilizer. Let them witness the tree, not the trauma. God's glory is too holy to be paraded like a trending topic. It is not marketing material. It is the weight of heaven. It does not perform. It descends. And when it falls, no man will be able to take credit for it. The glory coming to your life must be protected, not promoted, hidden, not hyped. This isn't about silence for silence's sake. It's about sacred containment, because when God finally reveals you, it won't be a post. It'll be a prophecy fulfilled. And by the time the enemy notices, it will be far too late to stop what has already been sealed in heaven. You are not empty. You are not forgotten. You are a vessel of something holy, chosen one. And vessels don't parade the oil. They protect it. They carry it in silence until the appointed time. This next level isn't about recognition. It's about refinement. If God has not unveiled what you carry, it is not because he's unsure. It's because he's shielding it from spiritual snipers who long to shoot it down before it learns to stand. Can you feel the tension between exposure and obedience? Have you asked why God keeps delaying the reveal? Why certain doors won't open until you let go of the need to be seen? Could it be that what you call delay is actually divine defense? That he's not hiding you to hurt you, he's hiding you to heal what will hold the glory. 1 Peter 5:6 says, "Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you." Notice, it's not about if you'll be revealed, but when, and heaven doesn't reveal to impress. It reveals to fulfill. God is saying, stop offering glimpses of glory to people who were never qualified to witness your promise. What I'm doing in you is sacred, not for spectatorship. Some glories grow in darkness, beneath veils, behind silence. Think of Joseph, hidden in Pharaoh's prison, shaped in obscurity. No announcement, no applause. But when heaven lifted the veil, the entire nation had to bow, not to the man, but to the glory on him. Media executive Tyler Mitchell, the first black photographer to shoot a cover for Vogue, spent years building quietly. He said, "Sometimes the work is louder when the artist is silent." And when his moment came, the world didn't just applaud, it adjusted, because the fruit spoke louder than the forecast. Aria, a dance therapist in Lisbon, once opened her heart and vision to a small prayer group she trusted. She thought they'd help cover her in prayer. Instead, her vulnerability became the center of gossip, distortion, and ridicule. "I felt like I handed my dream to thieves," she later said. That betrayal broke something in her, but it also built something deeper, discernment. In the solitude that followed, she heard God say, "Come back to me. Let me cover it myself." A year later, her project launched, privately, purposefully, and transformed trauma survivors across Europe. Isaiah 45:3 declares, "I will give you the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places." You've been asking for the treasure, but God is inviting you into the darkness where it lives. The womb of purpose is not a stage, it's a secret place. That ache you're carrying, that gut-deep pain from betrayal, it's not the end. It's a recall, a holy summons, a divine tap on the shoulder that says, return. Return to the silence. Return to the secret place. Return to the presence that never betrayed you. God knew their heart before you did. He saw the double-mindedness behind their prayers. He discerned the jealousy hidden in their flattery. And now he's closing that chapter, not as punishment, but as preservation. Have you wondered why it hurts so deeply when someone mishandles your vision? Could it be because your vision was never meant to be handled by man, but held by God? Are you grieving a loss or being re-invited into protection? Into a place where no opinion can touch what's holy? The mangrove tree, rooted in coastal saltwater, grows not despite adversity, but because of it. Its roots dive deep into waters that would kill other trees. And because of this, it becomes an ecosystem, sheltering life beneath its surface. You too are being rooted in difficult places, but those places are producing the kind of foundation that generations will find shelter in. Jesus knew the weight of betrayal. Judas kissed him, not to honor him, but to hand him over. And yet Jesus didn't flinch. Why? Because the betrayal was part of the process. It wasn't the end of the mission. It was the door into resurrection. And you, chosen one, are walking through a similar passage. So let the betrayal do what it came to do. Purge the noise. Let the ache drive you deeper into the secret place. Let the silence become your sanctuary again. Because God isn't finished. He's fortifying. And when He lifts the veil, it won't be for validation. It'll be for vindication. And every eye that doubted will have no words, only awe. This is not rejection, it's redirection. This is not exile, it's elevation disguised in silence. The people you leaned on collapsed beneath the weight of what you confided, not because your vision was flawed, but because your dependency was misplaced. God is drawing you inward, not to punish, but to protect. He's saying, I allowed the betrayal to preserve the blueprint. Now, return to me. Let's rebuild in silence, in truth, in fire. Have you noticed that the ones who hurt you weren't always wicked, just unassigned? That what you perceived as abandonment was actually divine subtraction? Could it be that you were giving access to people who couldn't hold covenant? And now, God is shifting the room. Not everyone will be invited into the birthing chamber of your destiny. Some relationships were seasonal scaffolding, and now the structure stands on its own. In Exodus 33:22, God places Moses in the cleft of the rock and covers him with His hand while His glory passes by. Notice, the revelation came in the dark, not in the light. The encounter wasn't public, it was hidden. God does His most sacred work behind the veil, where applause cannot echo and pride has no oxygen. That's where purpose begins to breathe again. You've been rushing to the spotlight, unaware that the light is blinding you to what God is actually building behind the curtain. You crave to be seen, chosen one, but God longs for you to be shaped. You want to be heard, but He's perfecting how you listen. You want a following, but He's preparing your foundation. You want exposure, but heaven is demanding exclusivity. Malcolm Gladwell, best-selling author and journalist, spent years writing unnoticed articles before the tipping point made him a household name. In an interview, he said, "The years no one saw me were the years that taught me everything." His greatest shaping wasn't on book tours, it was in silence, in rejection, in uncelebrated excellence. You too are being built in the brilliance of obscurity. Tobias, a brand consultant in Melbourne, felt rejected when a major client dropped his proposal unexpectedly. It sent him into a spiral of questioning his calling, but what he didn't know was that God was protecting him from a corporate alliance that would have compromised his spiritual convictions. Months later, he launched his own agency, not for fame, but for kingdom ethics. And this time, the clients who came were aligned not just with his skill, but with his soul. Proverbs 16:18 says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." What if the silence is not withholding, but soul surgery? What if the darkness isn't punishment, but a controlled environment for holy transformation? You are not being hidden because you're fragile. You're being held because you're flame. And fire can't be mishandled in immature atmospheres. The sapphire forms under intense pressure deep beneath the earth, away from air, away from eyes. It's not rushed, it's not shaped in the open. Its beauty and worth are a direct result of being concealed until the exact temperature, the exact pressure, and the exact timing converge. That's your life right now. refined, compressed, hidden, valuable. Have you considered that the spotlight you're craving might scorch the very thing God is still sanctifying in you? That being seen too soon can distort what was meant to be sacred? Would you trade a flash of fame for a lifetime of fruit? Would you rather trend for a moment or transform for a generation? Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Luke 5:16. He didn't resist crowds because he feared them, but because he refused to perform for them. And you're being called into that same posture, not because you're weak, but because you're too powerful to be released unfinished. Heaven is guarding your release date like a sealed scroll. You were never meant to be paraded. You were meant to be presented, whole, anointed, ready. This isn't a delay, it's a divine cocoon. The light you're running toward might flatter you now, but it can fracture you later if your soul hasn't been shaped to carry it. So pause, exhale, let go of the race to be known, because when God reveals you, it won't just be with a spotlight, it will be with substance, the kind the enemy can't steal, the kind the world can't ignore. Let God keep you hidden. Let Him work behind the curtain. Let Him fortify your foundation in the silence. Because when the veil is lifted, what heaven has done in secret will thunder louder than any caption could ever shout. You don't need exposure, you need establishment. The applause of men might echo in a moment, but the approval of heaven sustains for generations. That unease you feel, that growing discomfort, that internal alarm when you're around certain people who should be celebrating you, but instead respond with silence, resistance, or subtle shade. That's not your insecurity. That's your discernment waking up. What if the tension isn't confusion, it's divine caution? Have you paused to ask why your soul contracts around certain conversations? Why you leave some rooms feeling drained instead of filled? Matthew 7:15 warns us, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves." Some people aren't what they post. Some aren't what they pray. They're wrapped in church culture, but soaked in competition. Their words may be sweet, but their spirit is strategic, and not in a holy way. Not everyone clapping is clean. Some are casing your oil, hoping to contaminate it. You've kept them around because of shared memories, not shared mantles, because they've been present, not prophetic. Could it be that your loyalty to history is becoming disloyalty to your destiny? Have you confused proximity with purpose? You're trying to maintain peace, but heaven is trying to produce purity, and purity requires pruning. Dieter F. Uchtdorf, a renowned spiritual leader and former airline pilot, once said, "You can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails." He wasn't talking about boats, he was talking about people. In order to stay in flight, you have to correct your alignment. You have to discern which winds are from God and which ones are disguised turbulence. Layla, a prophetic dancer in Johannesburg, was surrounded by supporters who claimed to be her tribe. But every time she stepped into greater clarity, she noticed subtle sabotage, missed calls, passive-aggressive comments, backhanded affirmations. In prayer, God showed her, "These are not your intercessors. They are your interrupters." She cried, grieved, but obeyed. She quietly cut ties, and within months, new doors opened. Divine connections she didn't have to audition for. Her oil became guarded, and her authority grew. John 15:2 says, "Every branch in me that does not bear fruit he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit he prunes, that it may bear more fruit." Pruning is not punishment, it's preparation. If you're clinging to people who once served you but now suffocate your spirit, you're delaying not only your breakthrough, but theirs too. Because you're standing in a room God has already exited. The aloe vera plant, known for its healing sap, survives harsh drought by storing water deep inside and letting its weakest leaves die off. It doesn't try to save every limb. It sacrifices the outer to protect the inner. That's how healing is preserved. That's how longevity works. What you're preserving isn't just potential. It's generational power. Have you asked yourself lately, are the people in your circle protecting your flame or feeding off your fire? Are they praying for you in silence or promoting themselves through your proximity? Are they pulling you toward purpose or draining you into performance? Jesus, when raising Jairus' daughter, didn't let the crowd into the miracle. He told them to leave. He kept the room small, only the ones assigned, not attached. Mark 5:40. And that's your model. This isn't the time to gather fans. It's time to identify gatekeepers. People who don't just applaud the anointing, but cover it. People who don't want to platform you. They want to preserve you. Cutting ties doesn't make you bitter. It makes you obedient. It makes you clean. Consecration is costly, and clarity demands courage. This is the season of the remnant, not the many, but the refined. Those who don't just smile in your light, but fast for your flame. Those who don't just post about you, but pray over you. If they distract you, delay you, or drain you, it's time. Let them go. You were not born to carry dead branches. You were born to bear fruit that remains. Some of what you're fighting right now isn't from demons. It's from decisions. Not every storm is spiritual attack. Some are spiritual consequence. The warfare you're in, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came from open declarations that should have stayed covered. You spoke too soon. You shared too boldly. You announced what heaven had only whispered. And now the enemy isn't attacking your identity. He's attacking what he overheard before it was authorized. Can you trace it? The moment you revealed that idea, that relationship, that move, did the resistance rise right after? Have you considered that the backlash you're facing is not because you're cursed, but because the blueprint was broadcast too early? The enemy doesn't need to be prophetic. He just needs to be observant. And your voice, though sincere, may have served as an unguarded invitation. Genesis 37:5 says, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. God gave him the dream, but not the instruction to speak it. The dream was divine. The timing was not. Joseph wasn't punished. He was processed. The pit wasn't proof the dream was wrong. It was proof the dream was spoken before it could be stewarded. And you, chosen one, are walking through something similar. Not because you failed, but because you're being fathered. Best-selling author and leadership expert John Maxwell once said, "You'll never change your life until you change something you do daily. The secret of success is found in your daily routine." His greatest insights didn't come from the stage. They came from decades of learning timing, obedience, and discipline behind closed doors. You want success, but God is giving you stewardship. Lucia, a young interior designer from Florence, received a vision to transform trauma clinics into places of beauty and safety. Excited, she posted sketches and plans online, believing it would inspire others. But weeks later, similar designs began popping up, twisted, disconnected from her spiritual purpose, used by firms with no heart for healing. She was devastated. In prayer, God whispered, "This was heaven's design, but it needed heaven's defense." That storm didn't destroy her, it matured her. And when the time came, she relaunched, this time covered in prayer, covenant, and legal protection. What once sparked warfare now ushers in worship. Ecclesiastes 3:1 reminds us, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens." That includes the time to speak and the time to seal. You've been frustrated because you feel ready, but ready in your soul doesn't always align with released in the spirit. Timing is not a delay, it's a defense mechanism. God's "not yet" is not rejection, it's redirection with precision. The moonflower, a rare blossom, only opens at night, and only when the air is right, the light is low, and the temperature is stable, If forced open prematurely, it wilts in minutes, but when it blooms in its divine window, it releases fragrance strong enough to shift the entire atmosphere. Your vision is a moonflower. It wasn't meant for every hour. It's reserved for heaven's specific window. Have you asked why you're experiencing silence after you spoke in faith? Could it be that heaven was still constructing what you started exposing? Are you drowning in warfare you were never supposed to swim in? What if one more day of silence would have saved you from weeks of unnecessary battle? Jesus said in John 7:6, "My time is not yet here. For you, any time will do." His brothers urged him to show himself publicly, but Jesus understood divine pacing. He knew that visibility without spiritual clearance invites crucifixion without resurrection. He waited, not because he lacked confidence, but because he valued consequence. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're being taught kingdom rhythm. This is the classroom of patience, the waiting room of glory. You'll walk on water next time if you wait for the wind to calm and the word to be spoken. Speak only when heaven says speak, and the winds will part like curtains, not rise like chaos. That idea may be brilliant, but brilliance without divine timing becomes a burden. What God initiates, he also protects. But if you run ahead, the covering lags behind. Your passion is powerful, but it cannot replace precision. Heaven doesn't bless haste, it sanctifies surrender. You've wanted to move, but God is placing people, aligning provision, sealing contracts in rooms you haven't entered yet, and his weight is not passive, it's warfare in your favor. Learn to fall in love with the silence, to worship in the pause, to breathe in the waiting, because the next time you speak, it will be holy, it will be heaven-backed, and no backlash will be able to uproot what's been planted in alignment. Because when God finally says now, what once felt like denial will sound like destiny. Every no will echo as protection. Every delay will unveil itself as orchestration. And what looked like abandonment will scream divine strategy. It will hit your soul like thunder, not because it was loud, but because it had weight. Chosen one, every powerful thing develops in darkness. Seeds do not sprout in applause. Babies are not formed in crowds. Even diamonds, the most treasured elements on earth, are crushed, pressed, and formed in silence. You are not being ignored. You are being infused. You've looked around wondering why it's quiet, wondering why the people who used to cheer are now indifferent, wondering why your updates don't reach like they used to. Let me tell you why. God is weaning you off of false validation. He is starving the ego to feed the spirit. Because if you birth a promise too soon, it becomes a problem. And right now, what he's doing in you is far more important than what he's doing through you. Psalm 1:3 says, "He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth fruit in its season." Not your season, its season. Fruit is seasonal, and you are not late, you're planted. The reason no one sees fruit is because heaven is fortifying your roots. Maya Angelou, celebrated poet and prophet in her own right, was rejected by major publishers and silenced by trauma for years. But that silence wasn't her grave, it was her womb. When I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings was finally released, it didn't just sell, it transformed the emotional and spiritual language of generations. Her power wasn't born in noise. It was birthed through pressure, stillness, and divine delay. The most dangerous thing you can do now is force your vision out prematurely. An unripe mango may look promising on the outside, but the inside will be bitter, spoiled, and toxic. The same applies to destiny. Immature dreams draw crowds, but only mature ones feed nations. Jesus said in Mark 4:28, "First the blade, then the ear, after that the full corn in the ear." There's an order, a hidden law of progression. Your blade is growing, but you're mistaking early growth for public release. Not yet. Let it marinate in prayer. Let it soak in silence. Let it rest in sacredness. In a distant future, a young woman named Serafina receives blueprints for an energy system that could purify water for entire regions in drought. In excitement, she posts her sketches online. Weeks later, a global firm steals the concept and patents it without her. She is crushed until years later, God reopens the vision through an anonymous investor who finds her handwritten journals, not the posts. That time, she builds quietly, with covenant, and the water flows again. Her restoration was delayed, not denied. Nature itself testifies. The giant sequoia, one of the largest living organisms on Earth, begins as a tiny seed, but takes years of hidden root development before it even breaks ground. For nearly 2 decades, nothing appears. Then, almost overnight, it stretches into the sky, strong enough to survive lightning, fire, and flood. Its greatness came not from speed, but from subterranean strength. Have you confused silence with stagnation? Are you craving visibility more than viability? Have you been tempted to trade your sacred process for applause from people who can't fund your mission, protect your oil, or sustain your joy? Isaiah 49:2 says, "He made me a polished arrow and concealed me in his quiver." Concealed, not discarded. Hidden, not forgotten. You are not behind. You're being sharpened. And when heaven finally draws you out, no demon in hell will stand in the path. The resurrection of Jesus, the miracle that changed eternity, happened with no audience, no fanfare, no applause, just heaven, a tomb, and power. Let that settle in your spirit. God doesn't need cameras. He needs your obedience. Obedience is your oxygen. Your algorithm is irrelevant. You don't need a platform. You don't need permission. You don't need another post to validate the promise. You need proximity to the one who made the promise. Heaven is working behind the scenes, orchestrating contracts, aligning intercessors, redirecting enemies, and sealing doors you didn't even know needed closing. You're not overlooked, you're under construction, and when God finally pulls back the veil, what you carry won't need an explanation. It will carry the scent of sovereignty, and those who once questioned your silence will be speechless in the face of His glory. But for now, stay low. Stay hidden like oil deep beneath the earth, forming under pressure no one can see. Stay quiet like a lion in tall grass, still yet fully aware. Stay listening like Elijah on the mountain, waiting not for the wind or fire, but for the whisper. Because your miracle is not lost, it's moving. And when it arrives, it will not need an announcement. It will carry the scent of the throne room. Chosen one, heaven will validate what obedience births, not what applause demands. The warfare you're experiencing isn't because you're off track. It's because you're dead center in your calling. Hell does not send assassins to random addresses. The enemy is not omniscient, but he's observant. And what he sees in you, potential, purity, and power, is enough to stir up every assignment of confusion, fatigue, betrayal, and delay. Do you think it's strange that all of a sudden the people closest to you started acting off? That opportunities you were promised were suddenly retracted? That the silence feels unbearable and your prayers echo like unanswered letters? You're not cursed. You're being consecrated. When Jesus came out of the water at his baptism, the heavens opened and the Father declared, "This is my Son in whom I am well pleased." Matthew 3:17. And what happened next? The Spirit led him into the wilderness, not the enemy, not punishment, the Spirit, because approval doesn't cancel wilderness, it invites it. This is the part where the world gets it wrong. They think spiritual warfare means you did something wrong. But the kingdom understands. It means you did something right. The moment you said yes to heaven's assignment, you were marked. Not for destruction, but for divine training. You're in a battlefield that feels like a breakdown. But if you could see in the Spirit, you'd see angels standing around your weary frame. You'd see heaven's eyes fixed on your steps. You'd see demons retreating, not because you shouted, but because you didn't bow. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, not for being wrong, but for being right too soon. The enemy tried to silence him with iron bars, but instead that prison became a pulpit. When he emerged, the world didn't just see a politician. They saw a prophet formed by pain, shaped by silence, and refined by the fire of injustice. That's what happens when destiny isn't rushed, it's refined. Let me tell you what the Spirit of God is doing in you now. He is training your hands for war. Psalm 144:1. But not a war of bitterness, a war of wisdom, a war of discernment, a war of silence, stillness, and spiritual stamina. Elijah Sorella, once a youth pastor silenced by scandal, retreated into obscurity after being falsely accused. For 3 years he said nothing, posted nothing, defended nothing. He simply sat with God. And in year 4, without a single PR campaign, churches across the nation began citing his old sermons. God lifted the fog, not with arguments, but with authority. Why? Because Elijah didn't fight for his image. He let heaven fight for his oil. Look to nature. The volcano lies dormant for decades, gathering pressure in silence. But when it erupts, it reshapes continents. So does destiny. Quiet seasons don't mean absence. They mean something explosive is forming below the surface. Are you mistaking pressure for punishment? Do you think your tears disqualify your calling? Have you cursed the very fire meant to forge your future? Isaiah 48:10 says, I have refined you, though not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. That's not cruelty. That's craftsmanship. You are God's forged vessel. The attacks may continue for a while, but they'll stop controlling you. You'll stop flinching at darkness, because now you know your warfare is a certificate of worth. And once that gets into your spirit, you won't run from the fire. You'll start thanking God for the furnace that formed your faith. You think you're weak, but God says you're weighty. You think you're breaking down, but God says you're being broken open to birth glory. You think you're under siege, but God says you're under surveillance for promotion. This season may not end today, but your perspective just shifted, and that shift, more than the miracle, is what hell feared most. And when that wind comes, it won't ask for permission. It will tear the veil off everything that was once veiled, not to shock the world, but to fulfill heaven's schedule. Until then, you're not just being hidden, you're being honed. What looks like obscurity is actually sacred formation. Every hour you feel forgotten is chiseling your soul into a vessel that can carry revelation, not just recognition. But have you ever wondered why certain doors won't open, not even when you knock with excellence, humility, and consistency? Why do lesser qualified people rise while you remain unseen? Could it be that heaven isn't ignoring you, but insulating you? Elijah, the prophet who could call down fire from heaven, once found himself hiding in a cave, not because he was faithless, but because the voice of God wasn't in the fire this time, or the earthquake, or the wind. It came as a still, small whisper, 1 Kings 19:11-12. And if Elijah had insisted on remaining visible, he would have missed the whisper that redirected his entire assignment. You too are being drawn into the hush where your next mission will be handed down. What if your silence is not a sign of defeat, but a vault holding the blueprint of divine strategy? Leonardo da Vinci, the brilliant Renaissance artist and inventor, spent years working on incomplete projects. People called him distracted, inconsistent, even lazy. But in the silence, he was experimenting with angles, shadows, and flight. Concepts no one understood. Centuries later, his notebooks revealed designs for flying machines and inventions far beyond his time. The world mocked his pace, but heaven was cultivating his vision. In the same way, Your current pace isn't sluggishness, it's precision. Destiny doesn't rush. Miriam had her own version of camouflage. As Moses' sister, she watched her baby brother float down the Nile in a basket of reeds, a desperate act that looked like surrender, yet that disguise saved a deliverer. The same child she surrendered to the water would later part it. God hides his leaders in places that look like abandonment, but are really protection. You might feel like you're floating without control, but have you noticed how often control leads to compromise? Dario, a reclusive architect in Lisbon, spent 15 years designing spiritual retreat houses for women recovering from grief. No one knew his name. One day, a major earthquake hit the coast, and only the buildings he designed remained standing. When asked why his structures held firm, he simply said, "I built them for women who had already survived an internal collapse. I knew they needed walls that wouldn't betray them." What if God is building you to withstand what hasn't even hit yet? Is the delay really a delay, or is it God's way of forging your name in silence, so that when it echoes, no voice can cancel it? Psalm 27:5 says, "For in the day of trouble he will keep me safe in his dwelling. He will hide me in the shelter of his sacred tent and set me high upon a rock." What feels like confinement is sanctuary. You may look like everyone else in the room, but you carry a weight the room isn't built to hold yet. That's why they don't notice you. You don't blend in. You've just been blessed with disguise. The desert rose, hidden beneath cracked terrain, blooms only after enduring seasons of drought. It doesn't bloom because conditions are perfect. It blooms because its root system knows how to store just enough life to outlast the silence. Your root system is expanding in places no one applauds. But when you rise, it won't be fragile. It will be fortified. Have you considered that your camouflage is mercy? That your hiddenness is actually a heavenly escort into maturity? Pope John Paul II, before his papacy, survived Nazi occupation by hiding in quarries and studying theology underground. Had he spoken too soon, his voice would have been silenced forever. But by the time he stepped onto the world stage, he carried a presence so potent it dismantled communism without firing a bullet. He wasn't late, he was preserved. Joseph was also preserved, not just from his brother's betrayal, but from arriving too early in Pharaoh's courts. Genesis 50:20 reminds us, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Every pit and prison became a passport to influence, but only in the right hour. Haven't you noticed how heaven doesn't announce its masterpieces in the middle of construction? Natalie, a once unknown violinist who played on street corners in Athens, was secretly composing symphonies for trauma survivors. One afternoon, a war veteran heard her play and wept uncontrollably. That evening, he shared her name at a global PTSD summit. Within a month, her melodies were licensed for emotional healing centers across 5 continents. She never chased spotlight, she obeyed silence, and silence delivered her into destiny. Have you mistaken your silence for insignificance when it's really sacred insulation? Your camouflage isn't cloth, it's covenant. You've been sealed, not silenced, hidden, not hindered. The oil on your life is aging like sacred wine. And when God removes the veil, it won't be to reveal a version of you trying to be ready, but one who's already forged, already filled, already fortified by fire. So now you know, it's not that God is keeping you hidden because you're not worthy. He's keeping it from being prematurely exposed because it's too sacred to be mishandled. What's inside you was not designed for popularity. It was designed for divine precision. When the timing is heaven ordained, no force, no betrayal, no orchestrator, no delay, and no man-made system will be able to hold it back. This is not suppression. This is sacred sealing. When you're chosen, God doesn't rush your unveiling. He perfects it. And now you're being asked to trust what you cannot yet explain, to protect what hasn't yet been released, and to carry a vision that hasn't yet been validated. That's what spiritual maturity looks like. That's what divine obedience costs. God does not want it out yet, because He wants it right. And you, beloved, are the guardian of a glory that has never been seen before on this earth. If this word resonated with your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who is in their silent season. Comment below and tell us what part shook you, healed you, or reminded you of who you really are. And if you haven't already, subscribe and tap that bell so you never miss a prophetic word that's tailored to your timing. If you'd like to sow into this word and support the flow of content that's shifting atmospheres, you can do so through Super Thanks right below. And whether you give or not, please know this: your presence here, your openness, your hunger, Auntie, it already means more than words can say. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Now I speak blessings over you. May you be shielded by grace, surrounded by clarity, marked by discernment, and led only by the hand of God, not by pressure, panic, or people. You are not late. You are not lost. You are hidden for a holy reason, and when it's time, it will all make sense, and it will not be denied.